She pulled up to the courthouse in his car, polished, gleaming, still smelling of his cologne. And she didn't even bother to wipe the smirk off her face. What she didn't know was that the woman waiting inside had already signed the title. The morning air outside the Mecklenburg County Courthouse hung low and gray, the kind of colorless October sky that swallows sound and flattens everything beneath it into something cold and bureaucratic and final. People moved fast on the front steps, briefcases clutched, coffee cups steaming, collars turned against the chill that had arrived overnight and wasn't planning to leave. Inside, past the metal detectors and the security officer who waved people through with practiced boredom, past the echoing marble corridor that smelled of old paper and institutional floor wax. Courtroom 7C was already filling. The gallery benches were half occupied. A pair of paralegals on the defense side, 2 women from Priya Chandran's office who had been up since 6, a gray-haired man near the back who appeared to have wandered in from an adjacent divorce proceeding and decided to stay. The ceiling lights buzzed at a frequency just below the threshold of conscious annoyance. A court reporter arranged her equipment with mechanical efficiency. Someone coughed, then went quiet. Mara Sutton sat at the plaintiff's table with both hands placed flat on the surface in front of her, parallel, still, as though she had set them there deliberately and intended for them to remain. She was 41 years old and dressed in a charcoal blazer with a single pearl button at the collar. Her mother's, the button. She had not planned that and had noticed it only as she was leaving the hotel this morning. Her dark hair was pinned back. Her face was composed in a way that went deeper than expression, the way the surface of a very deep lake is composed, calm on top because of what is sitting at the bottom. People who didn't know her would have called it poise. The people at the defendant's table were starting to call it something else. She had not slept more than 5 hours in any given night for the past 4 months. She had spent those waking hours in the hours between 2 and 5 in the morning, sitting at her kitchen table with a cup of tea she never finished, going through documents that arrived in manila envelopes from investigators, from banks, from the South Carolina DMV, from a forensic documents examiner named Dr. Renata Wolf, whom Priya Chandran had retained without fanfare 8 months ago, before any of this had broken open, before anyone at the defendant's table had any reason to think the ground was capable of moving. Mara had read every page. She had organized them by date, then by document type, then by the order in which they would be most devastating. She had not told anyone that she had done this. She had not needed to. When she handed the organized folders to Priya at their last meeting, Priya had looked at them for 4 minutes and then looked up and said quietly, "He has no idea, does he?" It was not a question. "No," Mara said. "He doesn't." Across the room, her husband of 11 years, Denton Sutton, occupied the defendant's chair with the proprietary ease of a man who had never once seriously entertained the possibility that something might not go his way. He was 44, broad-shouldered, well-maintained in the manner of someone with both the money and the time for it, wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than most people's car payments. He was VP of operations at a regional logistics firm, a title that sounded stable and important and generated, with bonuses, around $300,000 per year. He had, over the preceding 2 years, spent a significant portion of that on someone other than his wife. He had justified this to himself in the way that men of a certain confidence to self-awareness ratio justify most things, by not thinking about it very hard. His attorney, a man named Gregory Fowler, was 56 and specialized in high-asset marital dissolution for men who could afford to make inconvenient truths disappear before they reached a courtroom. He had silver cufflinks, a handshake practiced into authority, and a brief that he believed was as airtight as briefs got. He was leaning toward Denton now, murmuring something, and Denton was nodding with the compressed satisfaction of a man being told what he already knew. Then, Denton turned, almost imperceptibly, toward the courtroom door. He was looking for her. She'd told him she would come. Tanya Bevins entered the gallery at 9:14 a.m. in a camel-colored coat that had been chosen for exactly the impression it created, composed, expensive, unbothered, and heeled boots that announced themselves on the tile before she'd fully pushed through the door. She was 31, with the particular kind of confidence that comes from having been told, consistently and by someone with resources, that you are the reason things are better now. Her hair was blown out. Her posture was arranged. She slid into the third-row bench seat with the quiet certainty of a woman who had been told she was winning, who believed she was winning, who had driven here this morning in a silver Audi A7 that she had pulled through the courthouse parking lot and left in the third row, slightly askew, with the casual imprecision of someone who is certain someone else will deal with the logistics. She did not look at Mara. She crossed her legs, placed her small bag on her knee, and directed her gaze toward the front of the courtroom, as though she had arrived for a performance she'd already reviewed. There was something almost theatrical about her composure, the careful blankness of someone who has rehearsed indifference and would like credit for it. She had done this, Mara imagined, in a bathroom mirror. She had practiced arriving in this room the same way she had practiced everything else, as if it were already hers, as if proximity to a man who took things that didn't belong to him had somehow transferred the taking to her, made her a rightful inheritor of rooms she had no standing to enter. She was 31 years old and sitting in the gallery of a divorce proceeding for a marriage she had helped dismantle, and she looked, from where Mara was not looking at her, like someone waiting for a curtain to rise on a show she had produced. Mara did not turn around. She did not need to. She had seen the parking lot on the way in. She had seen the Audi in the third row, 3 spaces from the entrance, still gleaming from a wash that had happened sometime in the last 48 hours. She had noted the parking angle, careless, unhurried. She had noted the parking spot itself, the location, the visibility. She had taken a photograph on her phone, time-stamped, and texted it to Priya without comment. Priya's response, received as Mara was walking through the metal detector, had been 3 words: "Good, we're ready." Mara Sutton had met Priya Chandran 7 months ago in the ground floor office of a building 6 blocks from this courthouse, in a room with pale yellow walls and a rubber plant that had clearly survived things. Priya was 42, wore her natural haircut close, and conducted an initial consultation with the focused velocity of someone who billed in 6-minute increments and considered a single wasted one a personal failure. She had a legal pad covered in handwriting so fine and compressed it looked, from any distance greater than 2 feet, like a language no one else spoke. She had listened to Mara for 40 minutes without interrupting. Then she had set her pen down. "Tell me about the assets," she said. "He's been moving things," Mara said, "slowly, for about 3 years." "What kind of things?" "Money. Into accounts I wasn't supposed to know about, and documentation. I think some of the documentation he filed isn't right." She had paused. "I think my signature is on things I never signed." Priya had been quiet for a moment. "What made you look?" Mara had thought about how to answer that. What made her look was the car, not the affair. She had known about the broad shape of the affair for longer than she had let herself admit. What made her look was the morning she noticed the Audi's registration sticker had expired and went to renew it online and found that the vehicle was not registered in her name or Denton's name jointly the way it had been at purchase, but in Denton's name alone, a transfer of registration, dated 14 months prior, signed by Mara Lynn Sutton. She had sat at her laptop for a long time staring at the scanned signature. Then she had opened a drawer and taken out her passport and looked at the signature on the back page. Then she had looked at the screen again. "A registration document," she said to Priya, "with my name on it that I never signed." Priya had uncapped her pen. "Okay," she said, "here's what we're going to do." That meeting had been the beginning of 7 months that Mara would later describe. To no one, because she had not yet found the words for it. as the most exhausting and clarifying period of her life. Priya had referred her immediately to Dr. Renata Wolf, forensic documents examiner, who had received the original registration transfer, the deed to the marital home, and 6 other documents bearing Mara's signature, and had taken 3 weeks to produce a 74-page analysis that began with its conclusions, which was, none of the disputed signatures were genuine. Priya had filed the findings with the South Carolina DMV, which had initiated a corrected title proceeding. She had filed subpoenas with Blue Ridge National Bank. She had retained a forensic accountant. She had done all of this while Denton Sutton was still submitting to the court a financial brief that listed the Audi in his name, the house in his name, and the marital accounts as substantially depleted due to documented business expenses, a brief that Gregory Fowler had assembled with confidence because Gregory Fowler did not know about any of it. The session was called to order at 9:22 a.m. Judge Elaine Harlan entered the courtroom, and the room changed. She was 63, silver-haired, and walked with the deliberate economy of a woman who had presided over more than 4,000 proceedings of this variety, and bore, in some composited form, the weight of every single one. She took her seat, adjusted her reading glasses, and regarded the room with the neutrality of someone who had stopped being surprised by human behavior approximately 15 years ago, and now merely cataloged it. We are here today in the matter of Sutton versus Sutton, case number 2024-CV-4417, to address the division of marital assets, she said. Counsel, you may proceed. Fowler went first. He was smooth and unhurried, as advertised. A man whose professional value was, in part, his ability to make fraud sound like paperwork. He outlined Denton Sutton's position with the quiet confidence of someone reading from a script he'd written himself and never doubted. The marital estate was, he acknowledged, substantial in certain respects, but substantially encumbered in others. The shared accounts had been drawn down over the preceding 36 months to fund business operating costs, costs he would document. The marital home, he emphasized, was registered in Denton Sutton's name, a transfer executed in 2019 as part of a refinancing agreement both parties had signed and consented to. The vehicles, 2 in total, the 2021 Audi A7 and a 2019 Honda CR-V, were, as evidenced by the registration documents entered as Exhibit 3, registered in Denton Sutton's name. He slid a neatly assembled packet toward the bench with the ease of a man pushing chips across a table he had already decided he owned. Denton, at the defendant's table, permitted himself the smallest, most controlled of smiles. It lasted approximately 4 seconds. Then he looked across the courtroom at Mara, and the smile took on an additional quality. A quality of confirmation, of the specific satisfaction of believing that someone you have underestimated has confirmed, finally and irreversibly, your underestimation of them. Mara's hands did not move on the table. Priya rose. She was brief, which was itself a signal, though Fowler did not read it. She said, in a tone that was pleasant and entirely without heat, Your Honor, the plaintiff will respond to each asset claim in turn. We would note for the court that it is in receipt of 2 subpoena responses filed last Thursday, one from the South Carolina Department of Motor Vehicles and one from Blue Ridge National Bank. We will be introducing both today, along with the testimony of an expert witness. A pause, small, controlled. We'd also like the court to take note of Exhibit A, which we are entering now, a time-stamped photograph taken this morning at 8:51 a.m. in the parking lot of this courthouse. She slid a print across to the clerk, who passed it to the judge. Judge Harlan looked at it. She held it for a moment longer than she might have needed to. Then she set it down and looked at no one in particular, which is the way experienced judges look at everyone at once. Fowler's pen stopped moving. Denton did not look at the parking lot photograph. He looked instead at his hands, which were folded on the table, and the look was the specific look of a man doing rapid internal accounting. Noted, said Judge Harlan. Proceed. The first hour moved in the formal cadence of asset documentation. Exhibits entered, account balances confirmed, property valuations offered and disputed, forensic accounting findings introduced by Priya's retained analyst, a quiet, methodical man named Elias Chambers, who had the manner of someone who found comfort in numbers precisely because numbers did not lie. He walked the court through the movement of $212,000 across a period of 17 months, 3 intermediate accounts, each opened and used briefly before the funds moved on. A pattern designed to look, at casual inspection, like ordinary business transfers. It did not look, under Chambers' examination, like ordinary business transfers. It looked, he said, without drama, like a structured attempt to reduce the visible marital estate before litigation. Fowler objected. The objection was overruled. Denton sat very still. Then Priya said, "Your Honor, the plaintiff calls Dr. Renata Wolfe." The side door opened. Dr. Wolfe was compact, 61, with close-cropped white hair and the focused calm of someone who had spent a career in rooms where the temperature rose around her and had learned to let it. She was a forensic documents examiner with 32 years of practice, court qualified in 8 states, and she walked to the witness stand the way all confident experts walk to witness stands, like someone arriving somewhere they belong. She was sworn in. She settled her notes. She did not look at either attorney's table. Priya handed her a document. "Dr. Wolfe, can you identify what this is?" "This is the title of registration for a 2021 Audi A7, vehicle identification number ending in 4417, Dr. Wolfe said. "Specifically, this is the corrected title issued by the South Carolina Department of Motor Vehicles on March 9th of this year, following the invalidation of a prior registration transfer document submitted on behalf of the vehicle." Why was the original transfer invalidated? Because the signature on the original transfer document, the signature submitted as that of the releasing title holder, Mara Lynn Sutton, was determined, following a formal forensic examination, not to have been written by Mara Lynn Sutton. She said it plainly, without emphasis, in the same register she might have used to report a weather observation. "I conducted that examination. I received 7 verified signature samples from Ms. Sutton, spanning a period of 9 years, and applied both the ASTME 1688 comparative examination standard and independent loop and arch methodology to compare them against the disputed document." And what did that examination reveal? That the signature on the original registration transfer is a forgery. The discrepancies in pen lift pattern between letters, the degree and consistency of baseline drift, and the proportional ratios within the letter forms, particularly in the capital M and the lowercase y, are consistent with a simulation attempt. Someone attempted to reproduce Ms. Sutton's signature from limited reference material. They did not succeed. The courtroom was very still, not politely still, completely still. The specific cessation of ambient sound that occurs when a room full of people stops breathing at approximately the same moment. "Dr. Wolfe," Priya continued, "you were also asked to examine a second document, the deed transfer recorded for the Sutton marital property in 2019, which attributed a releasing signature to Mara Lynn Sutton. What were your findings regarding that document?" "The same signature anomalies are present." She did not hesitate. Identical pen lift disruption pattern, identical baseline drift profile, identical proportional distortions in the letter forms. The author of the simulated signature on the 2019 deed transfer is, in my professional opinion, the same person who produced the simulated signature on the original vehicle registration transfer. Neither was written by Mara Sutton. The sound that moved through the room was not loud. It was barely a sound at all. A collective shift, a rebalancing of weight, the soft percussion of people in the gallery adjusting their posture as the architecture of what they were watching changed shape around them. At the defendant's table, Gregory Fowler had placed both palms flat on the table. He was staring at his legal pad. The silver cufflinks caught the fluorescent light. Denton Sutton had gone completely still. Not Mara's kind of still, not the composed, intentional stillness of someone holding something in. The stillness of a structure that has been hit at its load-bearing point and has not yet decided whether to fall. He turned slowly toward the gallery. Tanya Bevins was looking at her phone. Priya Chandran, without raising her voice, introduced the Blue Ridge National Bank subpoena response. The account had been opened 19 months ago. The account holder of record was Denton R. Sutton. The secondary account holder was listed as T.M. Bevins. Over the 17 months following its opening, the account had received transfers totaling $212,000, routed from the Sutton marital operating account through 3 intermediate accounts in a pattern that Elias Chambers had already described to the court. The account had been used, the bank record showed, to pay rent on an uptown Charlotte apartment. 18 months of rent at $4,200 per month. Car insurance on a 2021 Audi A7. 2 airline tickets to Cancun, both in June of last year. The origination fee on the Audi's lease. Fowler was on his feet. Objection, Your Honor. The foundation for these records has not been properly... The foundation, Priya said quietly, is the subpoena response, authenticated per the Federal Business Records exception, which was provided to defense counsel last Thursday, along with the DMV records. I object to the characterization. Counselor. Judge Harlan's voice was not raised. It did not need to be raised. Sit down. He sat. Judge Harlan looked at the documents in front of her for a long moment. Then she looked up. She looked at Denton Sutton with the focused attention of someone who has seen, across 40 years of legal proceedings, a specific category of person, and is looking at one now, and removed her reading glasses. Mr. Sutton. Her voice was measured, precise. The temperature of it was somewhere below room temperature. I want to be certain you understand what has been established in this courtroom today. Not alleged, established. She held up one finger. You submitted to this court 2 documents bearing forged signatures, documents signed purportedly by your wife, transferring to you assets she had no knowledge of transferring. A second finger. You claimed ownership of a vehicle that, following the invalidation of a forged title transfer, is registered in your wife's name. And that vehicle was driven to this courthouse this morning by a third party who had no legal interest in it. A third finger. You moved in excess of $200,000 of marital funds over 17 months into an account shared with a person who is not your spouse, and those funds paid for housing, travel, and personal expenses for that person. She set her hand down. And the individual who benefited from that account, who drove your wife's car to this hearing, is presently sitting in the gallery of this courtroom. Her eyes moved briefly and without heat to the third bench row. I'm running out of language for what I'm looking at. Denton opened his mouth. I'm not finished. She didn't look at him when she said it. This court finds as follows. The 2021 Audi A7 VIN, ending in 4417, is the sole legal property of Mara Lynn Sutton. It will be surrendered, keys, documentation, and all personal effects, to plaintiff's counsel by end of business today. The 2019 marital property deed transfer, having been established as bearing a forged signature, is void. This court is referring the matter of that deed, along with the registration transfer document and all related materials, to the Mecklenburg County District Attorney's Office for Criminal Investigation. That referral will be made before close of session today. She folded her hands. Regarding the marital estate as a whole, this court awards the plaintiff 68% of all documented marital assets, inclusive of accounts, investments, and property interests. This determination reflects both the statutory framework and the demonstrable documented pattern of financial fraud and deliberate forgery undertaken by the defendant. Mr. Fowler, I would strongly advise you to ensure your client has retained criminal defense counsel before he leaves this building. She picked up her gavel And I would further note for the record that this is the third time in my career I have seen someone drive a stolen vehicle to their own undoing. It never gets less remarkable. The crack of the gavel was very loud in the small room. For a moment, no one moved. The court reporter's fingers hovered. The gallery held itself in suspended collective breath. Priya Chandran set her pen down with the precise, deliberate motion of a woman completing a sentence she has been composing for 7 months. Mara did not move immediately. She sat as she had sat since 9/22, hands flat, back straight, face exactly as composed as it had been when she walked in. Then she drew one slow breath. She turned to Priya, who was already in motion, stacking documents, organizing exhibits, working with the focused, kinetic energy of someone who is simultaneously finishing this task and beginning the next 15. "The car keys," Mara said. "End of business," Priya said without looking up. "My office." "Okay." She stood. She picked up her bag. Small, structured, dark navy. Not new, not expensive, just hers. She straightened her blazer. She walked to the door of courtroom 7C, pushed it open, and moved through the corridor, past the court reporter's station, past a man in a gray jacket who stepped aside without being asked, through the outer glass doors, and out onto the courthouse steps. The air hit her all at once. Cold, clean, carrying the particular quality of October in a city. Exhaust and dried leaves and something that had been rained on recently and was still releasing it. The gray sky that had met her this morning had shifted while she was inside. It wasn't clear exactly, but it was lighter. The flattening weight of it had lifted by some degrees, and where the light was coming through now came through with intention, landing in the way that light lands when you notice it. She stood on the top step and looked out at the parking lot. 3rd row, 3 spaces from the entrance. The silver Audi was there. Slightly askew, the way it had been when she photographed it at 8:51. The finish still gleaming from its recent wash. Someone had wanted it to look good today, had wanted to arrive in something gleaming, had treated the act of pulling into a courthouse parking lot as a kind of statement. Mara understood that. She had understood it when she saw the parking angle this morning. The unhurried imprecision of someone who was not worried about how long they would need the space. Someone who expected to walk out of here having gained something. She looked at the car for a moment longer. 11 years of a life, 3 years of slow, careful financial theft, moved in increments small enough that each one might pass unnoticed, in the hope that no one would ever stand back far enough to see the shape they made together. A signature practiced in private, offered to the state as hers, used to undo everything she had believed was jointly held. And this car, this particular, gleaming object, driven here this morning as if it were a trophy, as if arrival in it meant something, as if the woman who had lost the least could walk into a room where everything was being decided and the vehicle she was driving would prove it. It was her car. It had always been her car. Mara looked at it for one more moment. Then she put on her sunglasses, took out her phone, and called a cab. Behind her, through the glass doors of the courthouse, voices had begun to rise. Denton's first, low, controlled at its foundation but with something working against that control now. The registered shock of a man who has managed every room he has ever stood in and is discovering, for the first time, that management requires a floor to stand on. 11 years he had spent in the same marriage as this woman. 11 years he had looked at her composure and read it as passivity, had looked at her stillness and read it as resignation, had moved money, signed her name, handed documents to attorneys, and sat across a courtroom from her this morning believing, genuinely, completely believing, that she did not know, that she had not looked, that she had not found it, organized it, boxed it up, and handed it to an attorney 8 months ago, who had then spent those 8 months building the exact structure that had just collapsed on him in courtroom 7C. Then Fowler's voice, pitched higher and moving fast, shedding its practiced smoothness in real time. The voice of a man recalibrating, calculating exposure, distance, what portion of this he can separate himself from before the district attorney's office begins making calls. The silver cufflinks would not help him with that. Then a third voice, higher still, with a quality in it that had not been there this morning, when its owner walked through the gallery doors in a camel-colored coat and arranged herself in the third bench row with the certainty of someone who has already decided how the story ends. That voice was cracking at the edges now. Mara's cab arrived in 4 minutes. She got in. She gave the address of Priya's office. The driver pulled out of the lot, past the third row, and the silver Audi passed her window on the left, close enough that she could see the angle of it, the casual park job, the faint smear of a fingerprint on the driver's side glass where someone had rested their hand. She looked at it for the 2 seconds it took to pass. Then she looked forward. The city moved around her through the windows. She was not yet ready to feel anything she could name. There would be time for that, tonight, or in a week, or in small installments over the next several months as the legal machinery did what it was going to do and the shape of her next chapter began to resolve itself out of the blur. For now, she sat in the back of a cab on a Wednesday morning in October, with her structured navy bag on her knee and the address of her attorney's office in her mouth, and the knowledge, settled and quiet in her chest, that she had done the one thing she had set out to do. She had waited until she was certain, and then she had walked into the right room, and she had let the truth finish the sentence she had started 8 months ago in a law office with pale yellow walls and a surviving rubber plant. The cab turned left. The courthouse disappeared from the rearview mirror. She did not watch it go. She had already seen everything she needed to see. There are people who build their lives on the assumption that the person they have wronged is not paying attention. They move money in small increments, assuming the total will never be counted. They practice a signature until it's almost right, assuming almost will be enough. They hand documents to attorneys and enter courtrooms carrying the comfortable weight of the lie they've told so many times they have forgotten entirely that it is won. And they look across a room at the person they have taken everything from and see composure and mistake it for surrender. They see stillness and mistake it for loss. They have never once considered that the still person in the room might simply be the one who knows how it ends, who has known, for 7 months, precisely how it ends, and is waiting with extraordinary patience for everyone else to catch up. Mara Sutton knew. She had waited. And today, in courtroom 7C, in front of a judge with 40 years and no remaining tolerance for the audacity of liars, the room had finally caught up. If that felt like justice to you, and it should, then do not leave this page without hitting that like button. It is the fastest thing you can do to make sure stories like this keep reaching the people who need to hear them. Share this with someone who is in the middle of their own long wait, someone who needs a reminder that the truth does not rush, but it does arrive. Subscribe if you haven't already, because we are just getting started. And the next story makes this one look like a warm-up.